Minister of Energy Jeff Radebe signed agreements on Wednesday that will allow for 27 renewable energy independent power producer projects to go forward. The deal expects to see 2,300 megawatts added to the grid and is set to be worth over 50 billion rand. Maduna Ngobeni from the Department of Energy joins me now from our Pretoria studio. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Let's start with the objections to the signing of these agreements. We saw NUMSA interdicting the department from signing, which led to a delay, and groups like the Coal Transporters Forum saying that at least 30,000 jobs would be lost from these agreements.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can just take you back in terms of what we are doing and what have happened since. We look at IPP participation in the energy space. We look at this across the energy sector, across the electricity generation profile. We don't look at only renewable energy, but we also look at coal, we also look at gas. And I think obviously, there are a lot of speculation about renewables taking away coal jobs, which is not true. Renewables doesn't compete with coal. It's renewables on its own, and it's part of the energy mix of the country. Therefore, I don't think it should be viewed as competing with coal. The issue of the interdict, it's a separate issue. We did, yes, indeed, go to court about it. And I think we won the case, and the court allowed us to proceed with the signing. So the issue of job between renewables and coal, I think it's a bit misleading. There's a lot of jobs that get created in the renewable energy space as well. And the renewable energy, it doesn't necessarily shut down a coal-fired power plant. Most of the power plants that are being referred to here, they are already old. Some of them, they are more than 50 years old. If we want reliable power, we need to start investing on new generation capacity. If we put aside the fact that we've got IPPs, we've got other people also generating the power, I think let's just focus on what do we need as a country and how do we fill the demand that is required in the country. If we continue to rely on old power plant, we're going to have a problem in the future, because the old power plant might not be in a position to supply us with the energy that we need to grow our economy. One of the allegations was that the prices for renewables is very high. I think we have shared those prices, and actually if you go to our website, you will see how much it costs per kilowatt hour to generate from renewables. At this point, renewables, it's one of the cheapest, especially wind and solar is the cheapest. Obviously, got those hydro, biomass, CSP that might be slightly higher, but all in total, it's a very negligible amount of power that gets generated by those technologies. And those technologies, they are key in the grid to help us to balance the system. Therefore, you pay a little bit of a premium for them, but the rest of the other technologies, they are very cheap and very affordable to any household in the country.
Okay, how much of this around 56 billion rand is coming to South African businesses, equipment and employment? Because we know that this is around the amount that is being spent, but how much of that goes directly into South Africa? There's been a complaint that some of this equipment is manufactured in China, and this amount of money won't be stimulating the South African economy.
Yes, obviously we don't have everything as a country. But we also got a lot of things that get manufactured in South Africa. We got manufacturing plants in Durban. We got manufacturing plants for PV in the Western Cape. We got manufacturing plant for towers in the Eastern Cape. There's a number of manufacturings that are taking place in South Africa. But there are certain components that we cannot manufacture in the country. And we do recognize that, and we continue to promote the manufacturing of almost everything within the country. But we know that it's not possible to do everything. To date, we also tried, when people submit proposal, to make sure that we separate between what can be done locally and what can be done internationally, and we need to have a strategy in terms of those that we cannot do locally. How do we make sure that it happens locally? And that can only happen if we got a proper plan, and we also know what we're going to procure by when, and we have a long-term strategy in terms of our procurement. That's why the program is done in the way it's done, that each and every year we procure a certain amount of megawatt from renewable to continue stimulating the manufacturing sector in the renewables space. But if we've got a stop-start, there's no way we can stimulate that sector, and there's no way we can get to a point where we can manufacture almost everything within the country. At this point, we do a lot of manufacturing. I'm just going to ask you to
give us an indication of how many jobs are going to be created by these IPP projects, and can you break them down for us into short and long-term jobs?
Yes, I mean, I can't break it down right now, but the jobs that we need to create, obviously there's a lot of jobs that will be created during construction. Almost about 60% of the jobs is directed to construction. The balance would go into the long-term operations of the plant. And I think one of the things that we don't say is that not all the jobs get created in the plant itself or in the power plant itself. Some of the jobs that get created in other sectors. For instance, if you look at how renewables works, you know, you got the operation centers that are not necessarily based in the power plant. Some of them, they are based in Sentin, some of them, they are based in Joburg. They operate this plant throughout the country. So you got those people who work in those operation centers in Sentin. You got also those people who operate the power plants on the ground. So you got that split of jobs, and people normally, when they look at how many people they work in the power plant itself, they assume that those are the only people who are employed by the sector, yet it's not the case. It's much wider than that.
Maduna Ngobeni from the Department of Energy, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. It's time for